this morning at this lunchtime is what we call the National Pilgrim Virgin Statue of Our Lady of Fatima. It was blessed by Blessed Pope Paul VI in 1967. It was given to Great Britain in 1968. And it was blessed again by the Holy Father, Pope St. John Paul II in 1982 during his apostolic visit to the UK. The crown that you will see is recently blessed by the Holy Father, Pope Francis. And the great significance of this crown is it's the same maker who made the famous crown of Our Lady of Fatima, only worn every 13th of each month. There are the jeweler, Litao and Irma, who normally do jewelries for the royalties. That's why if you see and scrutinize the crown of Our Lady, it has 8 arches, which symbolize for queenship. Okay? You'll see some roses there because Our Lady, when we pray the Rosary, we're offering a bouquet of roses to Our Lady. Okay? She said at Fatima, she is Our Lady of the Holy Rosary. All the while, she's asking for it because she is the Lady of the Rosary. Now the program for today, just for everyone's information, we will start hopefully in 10:30 without any delay. Hopefully once we've sorted out the problem, we will have a talk on the message of Fatima. It will focus on the 4 aspects of, or the 4 elements Our Lady asked at Fatima. One is the Holy Rosary, recitation of the Holy Rosary every day. Okay? At Fatima, she said, pray the Rosary, the terzo. Terzo in Portuguese here. Portuguese terzo is 1/3. And if you remember, there were only 15 mysteries in the Rosary before. The minimum requirement to our devotion to Our Lady, to the Immaculate Heart, is the 5 mysteries of the Rosary. Second, we will talk and explain the brown scapular, which is the consecration part. Okay? Who are wearing the brown scapulars here? Okay. And I'm hoping those who are not wearing the scapular after the talk, we will have a proper enrollment of the scapular for you to be validly enrolled to the Confraternity of Mount Carmel. And we'll explain the relation between the scapular and the message of Fatima. That's the second part. The third part is about penance, offering our daily duties according to our state of life. We'll explain that. And the number 4 request of Our Lady, which I said earlier, the forgotten part of the message, is what we call the 5 First Saturday devotion. Who has done the 5 First Saturday here? Boys, that's very good. So I think there will be a good number of people who will start their First Saturday devotion today. And you have all the opportunities today to start that. Okay? And remember, this is First Saturday. These are the 4 elements. What you are holding there on the pledge, the pledge is a pledge written by Sister Lucia in 1946. Okay? When she was in the walls of Carmel, and in order to propagate the devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, she made this pledge in order to encourage the lay faithful and the priests and the hierarchy of the church to do what I need us at Fatima. Praise God. I'm doing all the ad-libs for the moment until it is sorted. Okay, so have your cup of coffee or tea ready before we start. I'm just going to introduce the National Committee of the World Apostolate of Fatima. As I mentioned to you, we represent the World Apostolate of Fatima, formerly known as the Army. It is the official, okay? It is the official Fatima organization sanctioned by the church to spread the authentic message of Our Lady, okay? The apostolate is the only one with pontifical rights. All other Marian organizations who are spreading Fatima will be under the apostolate, okay? So you will be rest assured. When we speak here in front of you, we speak representing the Church on the stand on the authentic message of Fatima. Okay? Is it there? Sorry. Right. So my name is Oliver, and most people think I'm Portuguese. I'm not. I'm Filipino. Okay. But I'm the custodian of the National Pilgrim Virgin statue that goes around the whole country. And that is Jerry Rivera. He's also a national committee, and he is representing Southwark Archdiocese. On his right is Donald Foley. He is our national secretary and from the Diocese of Nottingham. And on the further corner, far corner, is Jed. He is also representing the Diocese of Arundel and Brighton. So we have two national spiritual directors, one in Wales and one in England. And hopefully after this visit, we are hoping, just like in other cathedrals, the bishops will appoint a spiritual director for each of the dioceses. And what we are hoping for is to start a Fatima group here that will carry on with the guidance of your spiritual director appointed by your bishop to carry on the message of Our Lady of Fatima. Okay? This is not just a one-off. Okay? Things will roll on and continue to do so in different parts of the parishes in this lovely Leeds diocese. I was looking at the archives of the Apostolate. There used to be a center here before, and today we don't have the bishop, but hopefully we will restart again the Apostolate. So I give it to you. It's now 10:34. Before we start, can I ask one of the priests, Father, to lead us in prayer, and then we'll start our talk on the message of Fatima. Can I ask you to please stand?
Surprise. I thought there might be 20 or 30 people, so that's brilliant. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Rosary and the 5 First Saturdays devotion as sort of very important parts of the Fatima message. Now, if you're here this afternoon, you should see the DVD, and then you get the whole story. So in a sense, it's a little bit backwards. But bear that in mind, I'm going to be talking about why the Rosary is so important and why the 5 First Saturdays. Because when you watch the DVD, it goes quite quickly, and it's quite easy to miss the significance of it. So, yes, you'll be able to buy the DVD, yes, the DVD will be on sale, the Little Shepherd's DVD. So that'll give you the full story. So, just, but to put things in the sort of proper picture, how many people have actually been to Fatima? Oliver may have asked that question. So it's probably about just under half of you. So for those who haven't been to Fatima, who don't really know very much about it, just a few quick pictures, just to put it all in perspective. That picture there shows the sanctuary of Fatima, with the big basilica in the background, and down there, sort of on the left, is the place where Our Lady actually appeared to the children, the Capellina. And it's a little chapel, and the statue there we'll see in a minute, and this structure has been built over it. There's a Sacred Heart statue, and there's the big basilica. So that's where Our Lady appeared 100 years ago exactly now. So this then shows actually the Capellina, that little chapel that was built, which has been refurbished. And there's a statue, that's exactly where Our Lady appeared. Now, I'm not sure if Oliver mentioned about the pledge, but if you sign the pledge, then they'll be sent to Fatima, they'll go in there in a little box, like a little post box. So that's where they end up. But that's actually where Our Lady appeared 100 years ago. Now the statue's behind, special glass to protect it. This picture then shows a procession going around the sanctuary, the statue of Our Lady, and they happen obviously every 13th of the month, on the season, and on the big the weekend as well. So now that gives you an idea of how big the sanctuary is at Fatima. That picture was taken from the top of the big Basilica Tower there. If I go back one, it was taken from up there. So it's looking back down the sanctuary. This picture was actually taken when the children were beatified in the year 2000. So, and they were canonised, just recently in May. You can see all the people there reaching right the way back. There's probably about 1 million people there. And that's the little chapel I was talking about in there underneath that structure. There's the Sacred Heart picture, statue. And all of the people in white are all priests. You can see what a huge crowd that was that day. So that was in the year 2000. So those are the 3 children, Jacinta, Francisco and Lucia. So now the 2 on the left are being canonised, they're saints. And Sister Lucia is on the sort of road to sainthood, she's venerable. And then the next one just shows a picture of what the children would have seen on that first day, when it was just them and the sheep and Our Lady. And if you look at the memoirs, which is probably the best book to buy, about giving you the basic story, I'm sure there'll be copies on sale here today. Lucia talks about the lady was more brilliant than the sun. So that picture doesn't do any justice to how incredibly brilliant she must have seemed to them, and totally awe-stricken, by seeing her. So anyway, that sets the scene. Now, as I was saying, first of all, what Our Lady was saying about the importance of the daily rosary. Obviously, I haven't got time to go into the whole story, but you can see that in the film, and it's in the books, and so on. So the first thing, unfortunately I can't read the screen very well at this distance, but we'll see how it goes. Each of her apparitions, Our Lady focused on the importance of the Rosary. So that is really the basic sort of building block, if you like, of the Fatima message, the Rosary. That's where everything centres around that. So during May she said about the Rosary, how important it was to pray the Rosary every day. And that's an important thing to note, to obtain peace for the world and an end to the war. Because this world we're talking about now in 1917, so it was during World War I, which obviously was ravaging Europe, and Portugal had become involved as well, and it's, Portugal had to go and fight in the trenches. And obviously, as we all know, it was a terrible, so many people, millions and millions of people died, and just a terrible conflict. So, but this is Our Lady giving the first indication about the power of the Rosary to bring about peace and stop violence and stop wars. So this is where it is not just, it is a good pious practice, but it's also about power beyond that, to bring about change in the world. So then the next, again in June, I want you to pray the Rosary every day, so emphasising the importance of the Rosary. July, I want you to continue to pray Rosary every day in honour of Our Lady of the Rosary, because only she can help you. So that's this point about Our Lady being the mediatrix of all graces, that all the graces we get and strength from God, it all comes through Our Lady ultimately. Even if people pray and they don't believe in Our Lady, the graces still come through her. But it's more so if we actually believe in her power. And then in August, that was the month they were kidnapped, continue to pray the Rosary every day. The children were kidnapped in August, which you'll see in DVD if you watch that this afternoon. And in September, again, continue to pray the Rosary every day in order to obtain peace, obtain the end of the war. So this emphasis on the power of the Rosary. And finally then in October, I am the Lady of the Rosary. Continue to pray the Rosary. So, say for instance at Lourdes, Our Lady said, I am the Immaculate Conception. So that was the title she took for herself. But at Fatima she said, I am the Lady of the Rosary, to emphasise not only did that she wanted to pray the Rosary, but she wanted to be known by that title. So all those things are indicating how important the Rosary actually is. And that's where one of the essential points of the Fatima message. So that's sort of laying out, telling us why the Rosary, what Our Lady was saying about the Rosary of Fatima and why it's so important. Now we'll come on and have a look at the power of the Rosary. So by the power I mean where it's spiritual power. So we could talk, I'll just go back a moment, we could talk about things going right the way back to St. Dominic, who is sort of traditionally associated with the founding of the Rosary, and he used a form of Rosary, the Rosary, in the struggle against the Albigensian heretics, going right back to sort of the 12th, 13th century. And that was one of the ways that they overcame that heresy, which was very much like a sort of culture of death type of heresy. They believed in suicide and were against marriage and so on. So it was a bit like the sort of modern culture that's now out there. And with the Rosary, St. Dominic was, through that, one of the reasons they were able to overcome that. And if we go forward a few centuries to the time of the Battle of Lepanto, when there was a threat, this was in the sort of 1571, there was a threat of an invasion of Europe by the Ottoman Empire, and there was a sea invasion, and there was a great battle out in the eastern Mediterranean, and the Pope at the time, Pope Pius V, he had asked for the Rosary to be prayed for victory in this battle. And it was all against the odds, because the Ottoman Empire fleet was much bigger, but they lost, and it was attributed to the power of the Rosary. And then later on, a century later, the siege of Vienna, when it looked as though, again, at this time it was a land army, the Ottoman army would sweep across Europe. And again, through the power of, this time, devotion to Our Lady, through the Polish king, this siege was broken, and the Ottoman army was pushed back. So throughout history, you've had these various incidents showing the power of the Rosary. Now, but it's not just sort of ancient history. If we go to quite within living memory in the 1950s, that was the time. If I sort of skip forward quickly, you can see this map. At the end of World War II, this is how things were more or less split up. You've got Russia and all these countries which came under Russian control. And GDR, East Germany, what happened was after the war, Germany was split up into 4 zones. So the three by there, but the British, the French and the US zones, they became West Germany. But the GDR, that was the Russian zone, and that became East Germany. And they did the same with Austria. Because Austria was tied in with Germany during World War II, it was punished in the same way, that it was split up into zones, and the eastern zone was there, that little bit there, in between Czechoslovakia and Hungary. And Vienna is there, the capital. So that bit was the Russian bit, and the other parts were the Allied parts. So if we go back, and so in 1955, the Soviet army actually left the country, and this came about because Franciscan Father Pavlicek, he'd organised a Rosary Crusade from 1946 onwards, and eventually he got 10% of the Austrian people praying the Rosary every day for peace in the country, and the Russians would leave. So they started praying in 1946, and it built up and it built up. And that was 7 million population. So 700,000 people in Austria agreed to pray the Rosary. And obviously, the Russians were there on their doorstep, so they were praying really earnestly, you know, and with fervour. So that went on for those years. And then, and he also organised canon processions. And he knew the President of Austria, so he had good connections, and he was able to get the thing on a really good sound footing. So that was the map I just showed you, and that was the situation of the country being surrounded by these communist bits and occupied by the Russians. And then, in 1955, on the 13th of May, the Fatima anniversary day, you know, the first apparition, the Russians announced that they were going to withdraw and sign a peace treaty, totally out of the blue. Because Austria was quite a rich country. So that, you know, this again is was showing that the prayers had paid off. And that was the only time they actually withdrew from a European country, and it was done without firing a shot. And in contrast, remember those two countries, the north and the south, Hungary and Czechoslovakia, in there, they both, obviously Hungary was the next year, 1956, they thought, well, the Russians have left Austria, so we'll put up a bit of, you know, kick up a fuss, and they'll get out of our country too. But that didn't happen. The Hungarian uprising was put down. And if you go to Fatima now today, you can see the Hungarian Stations of the Cross and the Hungarian Calvary, which were put up by the exiles, were paid for by the exiles from that, who'd escaped after 1956. So there's quite a connection with Hungary there. And the same was true of Czechoslovakia in 1968. Both times that uprising was put down. So let's go back to the map. Question is, why did the Russians get out of Austria, but not out of Czechoslovakia and Hungary, which are right next door to it? And I think the answer must be, is because the people were praying the Rosary in that organised way. Whereas in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, they were probably praying the Rosary, but not in that sort of organised way. People were praying it. So to my mind, this shows the power of the Rosary. Now, we go forward again. So let's go on to this one. And this is where the power comes in. Is when you pray the Rosary as part of a group. It's good to pray it on your own, but if you pray it as part of a group, which obviously you can do in church or at your homes or that sort of situation. That's where the power comes in. And this is based on what St. Louis de Montfort said. Now, his famous book is The Secret of the Rosary, and also his books about devotion to Our Lady. But in The Secret of the Rosary, which is on sale, or should be, today, he says that when people pray the Rosary, one person says a Rosary, that's one Rosary. Probably there's about 100 odd people here now today. If we all said a Rosary together, and there probably will be one later on in the cathedral, it's as if each of us has said 100 Rosaries each. You join in all the Rosaries of everyone else. So that means we say 100 times 100 Rosaries. Instead of just 100 Rosaries, 100 squared. And if you've got 700,000 people praying the Rosary, it's 700,000 times 700,000, which is something like 49,000 million Rosaries. So that's where the power comes in when people are praying it. And obviously you've got to meditate on it as well and think about it and do it in a devout way. So that's where the power of the Rosary came in. I think that's where the power came in to change the situation in Austria. And the interesting thing about it is that it was all done in a quiet sort of way, not in a sort of aggressive way or in-your-face type of way. This is how it works, that the grace gets drawn down from heaven through the Rosary. You change people's hearts, so that the minds and hearts of the Russian rulers were changed about Austria without them even realizing it. And something similar happened with after 1984 when John Paul II did the consecration, but we'll come on to that in a minute. So this shows the power of the Rosary, and things haven't changed, because then later on in the 1960s there was a situation in Brazil, in South America, where there was a threat of a communist takeover. And actually the women in Brazil, a group of women organised huge Rosary rallies and Rosary marches. And at one point there were 600,000 women in Sao Paulo, which in Brazil, which I think is the biggest city, were marching around the centre saying the Rosary, and this communist takeover just collapsed. The whole thing just fizzled out. And then the same thing happened in Portugal in 1975. Again, it was the women in Portugal who organised sort of Rosary rallies, and the whole thing just fizzled out and collapsed again. So there's the power of the Rosary. And the difference with our situation is that, say, for instance, it took 10 years, nearly 10 years for the Russians to get out after this saying the Rosary. And that was quite a slog. With the Brazilian and Portuguese experience, people, they were saying the Rosary before the thing and had a chance to sort of take root. And it was a lot easier to get it out. So if the situation is sort of stuck on the ground, as it were, you're in for a long bout of praying. So our situation in this country, say we want to change things through prayer and Rosary and sacraments, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's something that can gradually happen, like the Austrian experience. And that's about praying. Starting where this is leading is for us to sort of do this ourselves. The more people can get praying the Rosary, the better. So have a World Apostolate prayer group, a Rosary group in your homes, in your parish. People, obviously in the winter, people maybe not want to travel out, but if you some of your neighbours together, there's all sorts of ways. People are ingenious that you can find to pray the Rosary. And you can find it can be a social occasion too, and there should be a leaflet about that. But anyway, even if you haven't got the leaflet, you can just start a Rosary group. It's not that difficult. And those are some of the Rosary stuff that is available. Now, this is where I think what we need in this country, and what we're feeling in the World Apostolate as well. We need a similar type of campaign to say the Rosary. Maybe something we can get started next year once this visitation program is over, because that's taking up all the energy at the moment. But if you had a situation like that, where people, Catholics in this country start to say the Rosary in an organised way, Catholics make up 10% of the population. So if they would start saying the Rosary, but only about 10% of those go to church regularly, so it's a smaller number. But if the people who actually take it seriously, such as yourselves, who come along this morning, then over time you'll find the people who are lapsed will start to come back. Parishes will become more, faith-oriented and more spiritually inclined. And that's also tied in with the first Saturdays, which I'll come on to shortly. But that's what we need, something like that, because obviously the culture of death that's out there is now so powerful that there's no way you can beat them at their own game. It's got to be done in a spiritual way, to really change, to bring about change. And this is what Our Lady's saying. She didn't come along Fatima and say, you must get out and big marches and attack people or anything. It's all pray the Rosary, which is so simple and almost so childlike, but that's the way she wants us to do it, so that's what we need to be doing. So, that's the, those 10% start the Rosary, then we start to see changes, and that would, as I was saying, draw down the grace of the conversion, and that would lead to the church being revitalised. And we went as a group, the committee and so on. This is in the year 2010. We went to the Czech Republic, because that's split up now, Czechoslovakia is two things, Czech Republic, and we got a Fatima centre there, and despite all the going through communism, at that time they were getting 100,000 visitors a year at this Fatima centre. It was an old sort of monastery or convent or something that had been used to imprison troublesome, what the regime regarded as troublesome priests during the communist era. Then it was taken over. They built up this tremendous thing in an ex-communist country. So it shows it can be done. If people take it seriously, that things can be turned around. So that's about the Rosary. Now I'm going to talk about the 5 First Saturdays. And the reason why, to reiterate, the reason why I'm focusing on these two things, I think these are the 2 points, that the most practical things that we can do to sort of implement what Our Lady asks for on a sort of biggish scale, apart from our own personal devotion, as it were. So that's about Pontevedra. Now, this all goes back to 13th of July 1917, so that's just over 100 years ago. And this is when Our Lady gave the children the secret of Fatima, what's known as the secret of Fatima, which is in 3 parts. So the first part was that she showed them a vision of hell. So then after she said that, she spoke about hell, where poor sinners go. Now, the children only saw it for an instant, and before that they'd been promised that they would go to heaven. So it wasn't as Our Lady was being cruel to them or anything. It was, they knew they were going to heaven. And it was more for our benefit than theirs, to make us realise that hell does exist, and it's possible to end up there. But what the biographers say about the children, and Sister Lucia as well, that from that moment on, they took everything more seriously. They took life more seriously, and holiness and all these things more seriously. So that was like a jolt, even for them as young children, as it would be for any of us, and probably frighten us to death if we saw it, to be honest. So that was what Our Lady saying, you've seen how to save and God wishes to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. So obviously Fatima was not just meant for the Portuguese, it's meant for the whole world, and the devotion is meant for everyone. That's another reason why it needs to be spread, particularly in countries like ours, where in the past this was the dowry of Mary. It's a special country noted for a special country devotion to Our Lady. So that can be rekindled. It's there in the past. It just needs to be started up again. So that was about the devotion. And if what I say to you is done, then so do we say there will be peace. Then she spoke about the war, and then about a worse war breaking out. So that was obviously, as we know, as World War II. And then she spoke about the unknown life, which if you watch the DVD, you'll see that this afternoon. And this was in 1938, when there was what was like an aurora borealis in the sky. The whole northern Europe, so the sky became red, which normally is usually just right up in the northern latitudes. Now maybe some of you know about that, you've heard it from your parents, or maybe as young children might have seen it. I mean, I've gone to talk to them where there have been people who said, I was a little child and I saw that, So it's possible, that was in 1938. But that was the sign that war was coming. So that was what Our Lady was talking about, and then spoke about all the problems that are coming in the world, war, famine, persecution of the Church and the Holy Father. Now, these are the three most important words, I think, in the July message. To prevent this. In other words, for us, she said, these are all the problems, war, famine, all these terrible things, to prevent this. So she's giving the solution to the problem of all these things that come, all the terrible things. I shall come to ask for the consecration of my Immaculate Heart. So that's the first thing, she was going to come. And the second thing, and the communion of reparation on the first Saturdays, which is what we're discussing now, at this moment. Communion of reparation. But keep that in mind now about prevent this business. In other words, this is how everything is put right. By doing now what these two things that Our Lady is asking for. But the particular one is the second one, communion of reparation. Because the consecration of Russia, that was done in 1984 with Pope St. John Paul II. Now, just to look at these pictures, this is a sort of representation of the unknown light. Maybe you can't see too well. Actually, it was a lot. That was the only red thing I could find on the internet. But it's actually the whole sky was full of the aurora. You can imagine. Now and again, you see a really beautiful sunset. The whole sky is absolutely full. You know it's the sun. But this wasn't the sunset. This was the whole thing. Just absolutely thing. And the middle picture shows that was the Pope then, Pius XI, in the 1930s. That was the next Pope, Pius XII, when he was still a Archbishop. And that was Marconi, just out of interest, because this was when they were setting up Vatican Radio in the early. But that was the only picture I could find with the two of them in it. And then obviously that's Hitler, who, with his cronies, he was at their Berchtesgaden place in Bavaria. And they were there in 1938, and they looked out and they saw all the red sky. And Hitler made a remark to one of the people saying, "Oh, now is the time for blood," because he'd seen this as a sort of sign, of what was going to happen in World War II. And I was just reading a story recently about what went on in Poland, and the blood, the whole thing, terrible, terrible suffering, and which we can't even begin to imagine, what people went through there. But anyway, that's what happened at the time then. And then Our Lady, then she went on to say, so to prevent this, if my requests are heeded, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If not, she will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the Church. Well, that is exactly what has happened. Russia has spread its errors throughout the world, and we're now, first of all, it was sort of communism and materialism and brutality, and now that sort of anti-God, atheistic mentality has now come into our society, and we're living in this culture of death. Because it's one of the first things amongst the first things that the Russians did after the revolution in 1917, until about 1920, they legalized divorce and abortion. So straight off, that was what they were all about. And that's what now we're living through. So it's not as if Fatima is in the past and it's all over because communism collapsed. We're living through the after effects of it. It's like the aftershocks of an earthquake. We're living through that sort of period when, in a sense, it's more dangerous because it's so insidious. It's all around us. It's on TV. It's on the adverts. It's on the way people dress. The way people talk. The whole thing now, what children can access on the smartphones and everything. It's all there. It's all that horrible, culture of death all around us. So that's what we're up against, basically. Now, so that's anyway. And then the good martyrs with the Holy Father. Well, certainly a lot of martyrs under communism, and various nations will be annihilated. So I'm not trying to frighten you, but that points to things like nuclear weapons. So that's why we still need to pray. Just to say this thing going on in Korea, North Korea. So that's all this bad news, if you like. This is the good news. In the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. The Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me, and she will be converted, and a period of peace will be granted to the world. So you've got all the Our Lady saying what the bad things are, what we must do, and then giving the good news at the end. So. This is another reason why Fatima is so important, because it's pointing to a time of peace in the world, which we don't know when it's going to come, but at some point in the future there will definitely be peace. sort of the end of all these various conflicts that are going on, in the Middle East and Africa and various other places. And so another reason to take Fatima seriously and to sort of pray and do what Our Lady's saying. And in Portugal, so that was then sort of the end of that part of the secret. And then the third part of the secret, as you may be aware, was just briefly, that was in the year 2000, and Pope St. John Paul II authorised that the release of the third part, and that showed the bishop in white, who that was taken to be the Pope, going up this is a vision the children saw, Pope going up a steep hill with lots of lay people and religious and priests and so on. They got to the top where there was a big cross, and without the figure of Christ on it, and at the top, the Pope and all the people with him were killed. So and this was taken as being the persecutions that the Church had gone through in the 20th century. And with the Pope being killed, well, that was just after the assassination attempt on John Paul II. So it's taken, that was tied in with the secret, but it may well be that a future Pope will be assassinated. So it's all serious stuff, but again, another reason why we need to pray about it. So let's go on to the next bit. This is just to give you some images about, obviously some of these are in the past, but that's the anti-Christian persecution going on in the Middle East, even up till now. And then, there's sort of war, famine, persecutions, and the Holy Father symbolised by St. Peter's. So this shows the children after this was taken in July, after they saw the vision of hell. I think you can still see there's a sort of look of sort of shock on Lucia's face. That was outside the village church. That was a couple of hours after they saw the vision of hell. So now we come on to, if you remember, Our Lady said, I'm coming back. Okay, you come back for two things: the consecration of Russia and the 5 First Saturdays, the communion reparation. So she came back in 1925, so that was when Sister Lucia by then had become a postulant, aspiring for the Dorothean sisters. But she was in a place called Pontevedra, which is outside Portugal in Spain, to the north of Portugal. This was because in Portugal, at the time of Fatima, before that even, the king had been assassinated, and you had a sort of Freemasons and various troublemakers running the country. And there had been all these various coups and assassinations and terrorism going all the way through, and the church was being persecuted. It hadn't really affected Fatima, because Fatima was sort of up in the hills in comparison to Lisbon and so on. So that was why Sister Lucia was out of the country. And even then, the situation was still unstable. So as the religious orders were staying out of Portugal, but she was staying out of it. Then you've got a picture of Sister Lucia with the statue of Our Lady. So then Our Lady appeared with the child Jesus to Sister Lucia in Pontevedra, and as I was saying, she was a postulant. This is what the Christ child said: "Have compassion on the heart of your Most Holy Mother, and cover with thorns, etc." And there's no one to make an act of reparation. So this devotion is about reparation. In other words, I do something wrong to somebody, I've got to make up for it. I say something nasty to someone, I've got to apologise, or I give them some flowers or something. There's got to be. So this is, when we do this, we're making up for the sin in the world, our own sin and the sin in the world. So that's where the sort of idea is, a devotion of reparation. And Our Lady said, "My daughter, look at my heart, and with all the thorns." So that's symbolic of the all the sins that are going on in the world. So this is the promise associated with the 5 First Saturdays. I promise to assist at the hour of death with all the graces necessary for salvation. All those on the first Saturday of 5 consecutive months go to confession, receive Holy Communion, recite 5 decades of the Rosary, and keep me company for a quarter of an hour while meditating on the mysteries of the Rosary, with the intention of making reparation. So that, in a nutshell, is what the 5 First Saturday is about. Once a month, it's Holy Communion, confession, say the Rosary, a quarter of an hour of meditation, with the intention of making reparation. You've got to do that for 5 First Saturdays in a row. And if for some reason something happens and you miss one, and you've got to start again. But once you've done the 5, then you're covered, as it were, for that promise, which is a great promise of all the graces necessary for salvation. So, in other words, the promise of heaven, although you might have to go to purgatory for a while, it's a great promise. So it's a bit like the Scapular promise, which Oliver will be talking about later on. So that's the 5 first Saturdays, and this is the reason we've chosen the number 5 is all the blasphemies against the Immaculate Conception, Our Lady's virginity, divine maternity, her children are corrupted, and the images are reviled. So that's the reason why there were 5 first Saturdays in this devotion. So again, just to reiterate, it's not very difficult. It's only once a month for 5 months, and then you can carry on afterwards once you've done it for yourself, for members of your family, for your parish, for peace in the world, and it's a very powerful devotion in that sense. So it's confession, which it doesn't have to be on the day, it can be 8 days before, or even a bit longer. In some countries, they might not see a priest for months, so confession might and then also with Mass, if you absolutely can't get to Mass on the first Saturday, then you can get a dispensation and go on another day from a priest. And then 5 decades of Rosary, meditation. That it can just be, you can just have a Gospel, say St. Luke's Gospel, say today is a Saturday. So if you just read the first couple of chapters of St. Luke's Gospel slowly, and if you read it really slowly and think about it, that's a 15 minutes meditation. That's the meditation, then that's all there is to it. It's not a big complicated thing. And obviously, if it's given to children, it's not meant to be a super complicated devotion. It's something anybody can do. So that was the first thing, if you remember. Okay, the 5 first Saturdays. So that was the first thing Our Lady came back for. But she also said about the consecration of Russia. So then she came back a few years later, and by this time, Sister Lucia was now a fully fledged nun, sister, and by this time she was in a place called Tui in Spain. Again in Spain, where she moved. People move around, but she was still in Spain at that time, and she saw this vision of the Holy Trinity with the Father at the top, the Holy Father, God the Father, and the Holy Spirit, and Christ on the cross, with the chalice, with the host, blood dripping on the host, Our Lady holding her Immaculate Heart, standing by the altar, and then grace and mercy with water. So she saw that tremendous vision of the Holy Trinity, and then she was given this message from Our Lady. The moment has come in which God asked the Holy Father, in union with all the bishops of the world, to make the consecration rosary to my Immaculate Heart, promising to save it by this means. So, that was in 1929. Unfortunately, for all sorts of reasons, which I can't really go into, and some of them which are not really, we don't really understand why, it wasn't done until 1984, so many decades later. And this came about because of the assassination attempt on John Paul II. So about 3 years after he became Pope, you remember, and again, note the date, on the 13th of May, 1981, on the Fatima anniversary day, as he was going around St. Peter's Square, in the Pope Mobile, he was shot by this Aliashka fellow, and you can see how close, it was a professional assassin. So really the Pope should have died, but the Pope, he nearly bled to death. But he said, one hand fired the shot and another guided the bullet. And it was a sort of, as if the bullet in a sort of zigzag, just missed the main artery. But anyway, the Pope survived, and he read all the documentation about Fatima, and he realised that he had to do the consecration. And let me just go back a sec. So that was what he did. That was done in 1984. But this is what he actually said in 1982. So he was in 1982. He went to Fatima in Thanksgiving for his life having been saved. And he said, if the Church has accepted the message of Fatima, it's because the message is a reiteration of the Gospel. So he's saying the Church really, in a sense, has accepted the message, most definitely. And then later on, he said, the Church, the appeal of the message is so deeply rooted in the Gospel, the Church feel the message imposes a commitment on them. So it is a private revelation, and you're not absolutely obliged to believe in it. But John Paul II was saying, well, we should believe in it. It's such a strong message, and you had the miracle of the Son, and all the things that happened. It's really something we should embrace fully. So then, in 1984, the consecration that Our Lady asked for back in 1929 was done. This was the Pope in union with all the bishops. And the statue of Our Lady from Fatima was brought to Rome, and the act of consecration was done, and that was John Paul II in association with all the bishops of the world. So then, now it's called the collegial consecration because it's the college of bishops. So it's the Pope and the bishops. So it's the whole college of bishops with the Pope as its head. And all the popes have approved of Fatima. And so St. John Paul, he fulfilled. And that was what led to the beginning of the collapse of communism. So that was done in 1984. And then Gorbachev, consecration was a little bit back. Yeah, consecration was accepted because the Pope was in union, so that was why he accepted. Now, after that consecration, Sister Lucia was visited by the Apostolate Nuncio in Portugal. That's the Pope's representative. And she told him, yes, the consecration has been done, and now you will see things starting to happen. And it was from that point on that things started to change in Russia. Again, like Austria, without any sort of big external pressure in the sense that there was pressure from America, etc., but not in the sense of aggression, pressure. So, and then that's when all the changes started to happen. So Gorbachev became the General Secretary the next year, and he was president in 1988. So only 4 years later, he was president. And then after that, the Berlin Wall came down, and soon the communism, by early 6 or 7 years after the 1984 consecration, communism had collapsed, with hardly a shot being fired. And it's all down to, as far as I can see, the consecration, plus all the sufferings of all the martyrs you can imagine out in Siberia, in the gulags, what people went through all during the war. All that suffering was all sort of taken up, as it were, with the Pope's act of consecration, and the result was the collapse of communism. Plus things like the fact that the Polish people were so brave in going against, opposing the Russians, because they could well have decided to invade, sort of on a knife edge in some respects. Anyway, they pressed ahead, and that was the result, the collapse of communism. So this is the sort of let's go forward a bit. This is what Sister Lucia, just to emphasise about the power of the consecration. And this is just before World War II. She said, World War or world peace depends on the practice of devotion first Saturdays and the consecration of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and the consecration of Russia. So those two things are crucial, is what Sister Lucia was saying there. And this just shows her with Bishop Admiral and Pope, and he came back for a third time in 1991. Second time. Yeah. So this is where the 5 First Saturdays comes in. The Pope and the bishops have done the consecration. That was one of the first thing Our Lady asked for. And the second thing was the 5 First Saturdays. So now it's up to the lay people and the priests to do the 5 First Saturdays as much as they can, spread it around as much as they can. So it needs to get going in as many parishes as possible and spread out through the various dioceses. Now if you think about it, imagine you've got a parish where the people really take the 5 First Saturdays seriously. You can have a parish there where everyone's going to be going to confession at least once a month. People are going to be going to Mass more regularly, and they're going to be saying the Rosary and praying more fruitfully. Just the one thing of people going to confession. I mean, nowadays, quite often, hardly anyone goes to confession. So people have got no awareness of what their sins are, really. Or they might go to confession once a year, and it's just a sort of routine thing. Or twice, a couple of times a year. If everyone's going once a month, that forces you to come up against your sinfulness, and then you've got to start changing. So this is where the power of it will come out about changing parishes through the power of the sacraments and prayer. So that's where it's not magic, it takes our cooperation, but that's where the power will come from. So it will bring people to faith, so that people receiving the sacraments, and they will also have this assurance of going to heaven. So it's a win-win situation all around, really. So, and it revived, that stopped the persecution, John Paul II's consecration. So, if enough people do the first Saturdays and take the Fatima message seriously and pray the Rosary and spread the word, then that's how the church can be revitalised. And also, the Pope should promote it. If the Pope promotes it, then so much the better, and that will spread the whole thing, just as with the Divine Mercy devotion. So that needs to get going. And so please consider asking your parish priest if you can get the 5 First Saturdays going in your parish. And there's a leaflet about it, a nice glossy leaflet. It's only 1.5 hours once a month, so it's not a huge commitment. And where's the leaflet? So this is the old version. There's a new version of the leaflet downstairs, where the books are, and you'll get it. Oh yeah, at the back. So it's like that. It's a little, very nice. It's got the whole thing, everything you need to know. Jerry's got some at the back there, so you can pick those up on your way out. Right. Oh, 50p. Sorry, let's pay 50p. So everything's not free. Right. Okay. Well, this is. I'll just very briefly skip forward with this. I've got unfortunately, I've got the old version. What can I do to help? Yeah. Pray the Rosary, etc. As I was saying. The 5 First Saturdays, start the devotion, wear the brown scapular. Oliver will talk about that in a minute. Promote the message, sign the pledge, and in particular, we need people to come forward and help. Because we're going around the country, and it's no good if the statue just comes and goes and that's it. It's got to be something's got to stay behind and build up, the apostolate. As you can see, some of us are not getting any younger, so we need younger blood. But anyone to come forward and help to do things like work with accounts or email or helping with a pilgrimage. There's all sorts of varied things, but we do need people to come forward and help. So please consider that. I think that's that's about all I want to say. But remember, it's all coming down to, in the end, making out the triumph and a period of peace. So that's what we're working towards. So thank you for your kind attention. I'll hand over to all.
Thank you. Now, we distributed the pledge earlier, so you got your pledge. I'll just quickly explain that and explain the importance of the brown scapular. I won't use, that's fine. So the pledge, as I mentioned earlier, was made by Sister Lucia, in 1946. And the reason for that, she was a Carmelite sister. She was given a dispensation from an order of a Dorothean to become a Carmelite sister enclosed. So she has taken her religious name as Sister Lucia of the Immaculate Heart, because as what we mentioned to you earlier, the whole message, the central theme of the message of Our Lady Fatima is the establishment of the devotion to her Immaculate Heart. Okay, I just need to clarify that to you. And Donald have explained that in order to do that, Sister Lucia said, we are all encouraged to pray the Rosary every day. Okay, that's one element. Number 2 is perform the 5 First Saturday, which is on your pledge. Okay. Now the third part of the request of the Lady is what we call the consecration part. And what it means is during the 6th apparition of Our Lady of Fatima in October, if you remember, there was the miracle of the sun. Okay? There were 70,000 people who saw the miracle of the sun, and it was only Lucia herself who saw the vision of Our Lady dressed as Mount Carmel. Okay? If you look and read the book, Fatima Lucia's own words written by herself, you will see there that there were 3 visions, and you will see this later on when we have the film showing. The first was about the Holy Family. And Sister Lucia, I just wanted to point it out to you, wrote to Cardinal Caffarra, who is in charge for the family life, and said that the last battle that we are facing will be against the family. Okay, it's unfolding before our very own eyes. Okay? And the Holy Family, Jesus and Saint Joseph was blessing the world. The second vision was Our Lady of the Sorrows, and the grown-up Jesus blessing the world. And the last vision was Our Lady of Mount Carmel. Now, when Sister Lucia was interviewed why Our Lady appeared as Our Lady dressed as Mount Carmel, she said, Father Howard Rafferty said, there's a lot of Fatima books written about but it doesn't mention anything about the bronze scapular. And this is what Sister Lucia said. They are wrong. Because the Rosary and the scapular are inseparable. These are the two sacramentals that will help us to sanctify our duty to the best of our ability for the glory of God, to live it every day. Okay? Just like St. Teresa of Child Jesus, doing ordinary things in an extraordinary manner. These sacramentals, the scapular, which is the garment of holiness, will help us, plus the fact that we pray the Rosary, which is the school of holiness, meditating on the mysteries, and hopefully emulating the virtues Our Lady has practiced, will help us to sanctify our duty, to offer our day-to-day penance. Okay? Now, can I have a copy of the pledge? One of the pledge on the first number 1. Can I just quickly borrow your pledge? It says in here, to offer every day the sacrifices demanded by my daily duty. So what it means by Sister Lucia has revealed that God has called us to become holy. Okay? Penance, in every day that we do, whether I am a nurse by profession, so if I do my duty as a nurse, I have to do it to the best of my ability. But not only that, you do your duties for the glory of God. Okay? Now, being a priest, being a lay person, a mother, or whatever profession you have, you do your things to the best of your ability. We're all called, in whatever vocation in life, we are called to become holy. Okay? Now, penance, if I just briefly explain it to you, comes in 3 forms. If you remember, the angel of peace appeared to the children. Our Lady said, make everything you can as a sacrifice. Make everything you can, everything that we do as a sacrifice. So for example, what we call the necessary sacrifice. And what it means to have this necessary sacrifice is we abstain from sin and the occasion of sin. That's why the call of holiness is there. Okay, it's very important for us, necessary sacrifice. Now, Our Lady also mentioned, make everything you can. There are sacrifices that we can offer every day, what we call the voluntary. You do it voluntarily. Just like the children of Fatima, they were so thirsty, but they offered their thirst for the conversion of sinners. There's also one point in the books of Sister Lucia. They tied in their waist a rope as a form of sacrifice for the conversion of sinners and for the Holy Father. And even Our Lady on the 5th apparition in September said, just take it off at night time. God is pleased with your sacrifices. They were so hungry, but they offered their food. These are what we call mortification. And these are what we call voluntary sacrifice that we can offer. And if we do that to the best of our ability and for the glory of God, that can be very meritorious for the conversion of sinners. Our Lady will use your prayer and your sacrifices for those people who are in most need of God's mercy at that very moment. Okay? Remember, we are a church militant. We pray for others, the suffering souls in purgatory, we pray for them, and also we pray to the saints in heaven, the angels in heaven. We do have our prayer as an effect on the universal body of our Lord Jesus Christ. Okay? Now, what are these involuntary sacrifices? And these are sacrifices that we don't want. Sickness, illness, tragedy in life, tragic events in life. But if we offer our sufferings, our illness, in communion with the suffering of our Lord, that can also be very, very meritorious if you accept that willingly and offer it to God. That's why Our Lady Fatima said, make everything you can as a sacrifice for the conversion of sinners. Okay? And that is actually what it meant when Sister Lucia wrote that. Make everything in our daily duty to offer that every day. Now, this part is about consecration. I'm going to talk about the consecration aspect, which I have digressed earlier. So Sister Lucia said, the Rosary and the Scapular are inseparable. And then she further said, if you want to be fully compliant, completely compliant to the message of Our Lady, one should wear the Scapular of Mount Carmel. because it is an external sign of our devotion to the Immaculate Heart. That's why I said earlier, the central theme of the message is about devotion to her Immaculate Heart. And by wearing the scapular, it is our consecration, our totus tuus, just like the Holy Father, Pope St. John Paul II. The motto of our Holy Father was Totus tuus Maria, I am all yours, Mary. That you offer everything you got, what you have, talents, abilities, to God through the hands of our dear Mother. That is the meaning of consecration. You set aside for the glory of God. So you're giving yourself, and I'm not sure if you know, but tomorrow we're traveling to Carfin, the shrine of Our Lady of Carfin, because the whole bishops of Scotland will consecrate their whole country, Scotland, to the Immaculate Heart. And tomorrow, you can be spiritually united with that, with this special consecration to be done in Scotland and Carfin. Our country here in England and Wales has been consecrated in 1948 in the grounds of the National Shrine in Walsingham. It was reconsecrated by Cardinal Nichols last 18th of February when we inaugurated the tour of the National Pilgrim Virgin Statue and the relics around the country. Okay? Now, Pope Pius XII also declared that basically the wearing of the scapular in the 1940s is a sign of our consecration to the Immaculate Heart. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. Now, the scapular was given to this country in 1251. The feast of Mount Carmel is July 16. Remember, the Carmelites were actually in Palestine, but because they were persecuted before, just like in the current times now, like ISIS, they all transferred here in Western Europe. They settled tradition says, Our Lady appeared to St. Simon's Stock in Aylesford or in Kent, or in Cambridge, okay? But if you go to Aylesford, you have the skull of St. Simon's Stock there. And what is very important when Our Lady appeared to St. Simon's Stock, when they, as a group, were actually having persecution within and outside, he prayed in his cell and prayed to Our Lady. Our Lady appeared to St. Simon's Stock holding his scapular. Now, if you've seen the sisters, we have scapulars there, sisters here. The long garment there is what we call the scapular. It's a long apron. There's an inside there which is the tunic. They have the capuche, what's this, a hood. And what's important for the Carmel is the white, the cream that they wear is their cloak. And that's the reason for Elijah and Elisha, if you read at the Bible, okay? But when Our Lady appeared to St. Simon's Stock on July 16, 1251, the most important aspect of their habit was their scapular. And this is what Our Lady said to St. Simon's Stock. Receive, my beloved son, this habit of your order. This shall be to you and to all Carmelites a privilege. For whosoever dies clothed in the scapular shall not suffer eternal fire. It is a promise of salvation, but it is very important, as what Donald said, it's not magic, but we need to cooperate on the grace given to us by God. Because it's a sacramental, we have to cooperate. But the most important there is Our Lady will provide for us. If we faithfully wear her garment of holiness, Our Lady will provide for us two great graces. One is what we call the grace to remain in the state of grace, or the grace of holy perseverance, that you persevere. Because human as we are, and because of our corrupt nature, we always have the tendency to sin. We are all sinners. But Our Lady will obtain for us the grace to persevere. Okay? Our Lady will also obtain for us at the hour of our death the grace of perfect contrition for our sins. That's why when we say, Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us at the hour of our death. It's not only that you are being so sorry for all the sins you have committed against God because out of fear, but it's perfect because you are sorry because you are offended God, who is God Himself, out of love. Okay? And that is the promise of Our Lady. Now, to have this promise of Our Lady, you need to have what we call a valid enrollment. For those who haven't worn a scapular, we will have a proper enrollment and investiture this afternoon at 3 o'clock. So Reverend Deacon will basically say the prayer, and you'll be invested with a brown scapular. Okay? In the rules of Carmel, it doesn't need to have anything on the front. You can wear it one at the back, one at the front. It doesn't need to have a photo or embroidery, as long as there's a brown cloth. Okay? And you will receive automatically, to be validly enrolled, you are enrolled for lifetime. So what it needs to happen if it's broken, you just need to have a blessed scapular as long as you have been validly enrolled. Okay? Okay, I've mentioned that to you. Now, when we distribute the brown scapular later on when you buy something, I think it's available at the back, it's only a £1 donation. So we can go around and distribute more in other parishes and other cathedrals. So we will have an explanation for those, if you wanted to buy something for other people, they can still have a valid enrollment as long as you tell them that the prayers are said in here, okay, and also at the back as well. Okay. Now, that's the brown scapular, the promise of salvation. Now, at Fatima, if you remember in July, Our Lady, when she opened her hands, there was a light penetrated the earth, and you have been mentioned it was the first part of the secret, which is the vision of hell. Okay? Hell, heaven, purgatory really exist. As what Donald said, if the church has accepted the message of Fatima, it is because it contains the truth and the call of the gospel itself. Nothing is new there, nothing is added, but we are being reminded as what the children saw, poor souls go to hell because there's no one to make sacrifices for them. This is what Our Lady said in July. In order to save souls to go to hell, God wants to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. But look at the promise of Our Lady to the children of Fatima in June of 1917. When with her Immaculate Heart she said, I will take Jacinta and Francisco soon to heaven. But you, Lucia, will stay for some time longer. And she stayed because she died at the age of 97 in year 2005. For some time longer, because Jesus wants to make use of you to make me known and loved. And He wants to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. That's why not only we bring the statues as mentioned earlier for the devotional part, but it is very important, and I thank you all for your presence today, because it is very important for you to receive the correct formation on Fatima, because there's a lot of controversies and issues, and when we speak here, we speak on behalf of the Church, of what's the stand of the Catholic Church regarding Fatima. Okay? Now, I've explained the 4 elements now. Okay? So if you are happy with that, you pray the Rosary every day, you wear the scapular later on, to be invested with the brown scapular. You do the 5 first Saturday, and then you do your duties. You are all expected to do it anyway. You sign your pledge, and I ask again, sorry, is at the side of this, what you do is you sign, you put it in your altar or where you want it kept, breviary or anything that can be reminded of you, and then you put your name, your details, and we will put this at the chapel of the apparitions. I have offered a bundles already a lot when I went to Fatima in July, and I'm going there in October again for our meeting. But before that, I can send all of those that we've gathered in the previous cathedrals. Write your details, and we will offer this to Our Lady. And for those, is the signing sheet still going around? The signing sheets. Please do write your details so we can inform you of the update about the message of Fatima. So this is the other half. The other half will talk about supporting the apostolate. And as you know, it is a spiritual works of mercy that what we're doing. But traveling across the whole country, really printing and giving out prayer cards and literatures and things like that. We also need support. So if you wanted to, at your own free will donation, if you want to do that, we can basically put something and offer it to the address below. But there will be a retiring collection later on after the Mass. I would really ask and appeal to your good heart if you can help us support the works of Our Lady. This is not our apostolate, this is Our Lady's apostolate. And it is very important that this message goes across the whole country at different parts of England and Wales. What is expected of you then is just to pray the morning offering at the back. Okay? You pray the morning offering. In other words, you're offering all that you can do for the whole day and offering it in communion with the Masses set throughout the world. I think that's all really for me. We've explained the 4 elements. Just for your guidance, there are 2 booklets that we are distributing today. One has been distributed, prepared by the cathedral. Okay, we will use this at 12 o'clock. But we also have inserted our own booklets, which is a generic booklet, and we have the prayers in here. So just make sure you have 2 parts of the booklet. Please keep it with you, it's your souvenir. Okay, and you have all the details here. Our procession will start in we will be preparing shortly. The Mass and the Enrollment will be done at 12 o'clock. So I would ask you now, before we go, we just have to say a final prayer. And thank you again for coming in today and for listening to us. Ave Maria. May I ask you to please stand in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Immaculate Heart of Mary, pray for us. Our Lady of the Rosary of Fatima, pray for us. Saint Jacinta Marto, pray for us. Saint Francisco Marto, pray for us. Servant of God, Sister Lucia, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.